All right, we are live. I'm here with Ivan Raiklin, and we are going to chat about who he is, what he's doing, why he thinks it's important. And so, sir, we'll kick it off with you as we were chatting beforehand. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. You mentioned that you're a Marine, so if I wasn't a Green Beret, I'd say hoorah, but because I am, I can't say that. Anyhow,
Yeah,
a
no
little bit
worries,
about my
no worries.
background. I'm going to try to do it in 1 minute. So I was born in
Okay.
1976 to recently political asylees from the Soviet Union. They left in 74 from communism, fleeing communism to the United States through the Jackson-Vanik Amendment process, which was allowed Soviet Jews. My father was his mother, so my grandma was Jewish, but I was raised Eastern Orthodox mom and Christian, and then my father was agnostic, basically practicing wise. And I was born in 1976 in New York in the Bronx. Grew up there, I should say, until I was basically 4. Then went to upstate Catskill Mountains in Grahamsville till I was 10. Moved to Iowa when my father finished his PhD and started teaching at the University of Northern Iowa. So I spent 14 years in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Went to school there, elementary, junior high, high school, college, University of Northern Iowa. Went to join the National Guard, ROTC. 25 years later, I became a intel officer, Green Beret, military diplomat, countering ISIS, Taliban, MS-13, Russian aggression across 5 continents in 5 languages. Picked up a law degree to focus on national security law, constitutional law, and then what they did to General Flynn and when they stole the 2020 election. That was problematic to me because last assignments that I had in the active duty, I guess, full time space was when I was teaching intelligence analysis at the Defense Intelligence Agency at the premier analytic program that they have there at the Joint Military Intelligence Training Center. And then in my reserve capacity, I was a lieutenant colonel tech scout in the Army Reserves out in Silicon Valley in the greater Bay Area. So the context of knowing the national security ecosystem with Silicon Valley, put those two together. I observed an illegally conducted election and I had a lot of questions, and I used the same analytic process that I taught others in the intel community to conduct, apply that to an illegal election, COVID con, January 6th Fedsurrection, and everything subsequent to that. And I created a deep state target list of every single individual within the federal, and mostly federal executive branch, sometimes in the legislative branch, that were involved in the illegal spying operation in 2016, all the way up to and including the illegally certified election, all known collectively as the deep state, essentially coup, creating the deep state target list, where I can explain by name, date, place, transgression by category, those individuals to the tune of about 600 that were involved in the destruction of our constitutional order. And now I'm coming for them.
How do you, I guess, why I want to get directly into it because being a soldier, a Green Beret, how do you balance the legal side of like, hey, I want to do this the most peacefully and ethically side with
Yeah,
the other side? Like, how do you balance those two to be? And my thought is like, hey, because you want to be above reproach. You want to do this
absolutely.
the way where it's so above board that nobody could say that it's wrong or this or that. Is that the idea,
That
or what's
that
your
is
thought behind that?
exactly. I love how you framed it. That is exactly the intent of everything that I do. Everything
Yep.
I operate under the that framework. It's beyond reproach. And so some of my rhetoric, when I say it, it calls out how they failed to do it in the most legal, moral, and ethical manner. And I'll explain this. First, you asked me, how do I reconcile what most people think of, oh, Green Beret, kinetic action on behalf of the United States government to bring and lay waste to the enemy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a physical kinetic action that most people associate with. And then on the legal front, you're going through this process known as collection of evidence, the presentation of evidence, convincing the jury in the court of law, and making sure that you're doing it in the proper procedure as laid forth by the bench or the court that you're in front of, the judge, so that you do it in a methodical, rational, analytic process. Okay, great. This is a great question that you're asking me. I think this is the debut time that I'm going to actually have this question to answer. So I'll say it this way.
Sure.
As a Green Beret, we are trained to conduct what's called unconventional warfare. And in that framework, that specifically means the U.S. government authorizes me to work with my team deployed to another country where that government is not friendly to U.S. foreign policy interests. I am tasked to link up with an indigenous force, go through the 7 phases of unconventional warfare, which is, in summary, train, advise, and equip a, from their government's perspective, insurgent force. Build that capability so that they can replace the existing government so that that force that is going to be in power is friendly to United States interests. As part of that process, you train, advise, and equip them in their language, with their culture, within the legal framework of what you're authorized as a military officer and a military enlisted military professional under U.S. law. Okay? In some regard, you're authorized that kinetic capability. However, as a Green Beret, you're a force multiplier, making sure that your surrogate force, if you will, is doing it according to our cultural and legal framework as closely as possible. Now, when you take away when you take away the kinetic and only leave the intellectual, the training, advising, and equipping from the intellectual and resourcing aspect, and limit it further within the U.S. constitutional framework, within U.S. laws, constitution, moral, and ethical standards, that activity, limited by that, is what I'm trying to conduct in the United States with the objective of creating the maximum allowable consequences for illegal behavior by specific individuals within primarily our former and current members of the federal executive branch, and in some aspects, constitutional actors, former, current, at the state level. Meaning, I'm trying to create a capability outside of the system to make sure that the system follows the rule of law. And the way we do that in our current technological capability is to identify the threat, lay out in the court of public opinion their transgressions, and let their friends, family, neighbors, every single institution that they're involved in, to include their colleagues at work, know exactly what crime they committed, and that if those around them that did not quite commit the crime know about that, come forward as a whistleblower to make sure that they join forces with us to create the maximum consequences for that egregious conduct. In addition, I search for silos of information and evidence where I can. This is the legal side, right? Where can we find evidence? But it's also on my intelligence side. So in intelligence, you explain what you know based on the evidence. You lay out what you don't know, and you create a collection strategy to be able to collect that information gap, intel gap. And then you give your assumptions and your assessment based on that, always seeking further information to increase your confidence level and probability rating on your assessments. So, using the legal, analytic, intel, and military tactical, operational, strategic planning experience that I have, I'm trying to apply it to our constitutional order as I understand it, and then convey it to the nation on how we autocorrect the lawless, belligerent, illegitimate executive branch that is currently acting at the behest of China, squatting in our White House. And to a greater, broader extent, there are many members of Congress that are China first, Ukraine first, Israel first, both House and Senate, as well as in the executive branch, because they are also leveraged and tethered by financial interests that put them in a compromising position. And because no one else was doing anything about it, barely anyway, I thought to myself, Who, other than somebody like me, has the understanding of the global order, the national structure, with the background, knowledge, experience, and network, and the clean, pristine background to go maximally exposing those that have already exhibited lawless behavior, that are in positions of power, that are going to continue that lawlessness to come after people that are trying to expose them? You have to have people that are completely clean, that have the courage to go to the max with the mindset of, I'm going to play chicken with you, and there are two options. Either I win or you lose. And if part of you losing results in mutually assured destruction, I'm okay with that, because my children don't have to deal with them. And that is a win.
Do you think your background, from where your parents' background, influenced you to have this, I would say, zeal? I don't know how old you are. I'm 42.
I'm
So,
48.
um,
But I was born on leap
okay.
day, so that makes me 12. So I'm a little younger than 48, a little older than 12.
Um, but so I guess my question is like, coming from that, having I know you didn't experience exactly, but having that generation, your parents come here and experience that level of, like again, that Soviet bloc era, I'm like, of just death and destruction, and just craziness, like something that I have never experienced, and I don't have my parents in it, but do you think that gives you a spark and so I ask that because I feel like the baby boomer generation in our country is kind of just sitting fat and happy in their pleasure trap of what just and they're just kind of like, it's gonna be okay, but whatever. And where you see it, and maybe I do too, where you see it and you're like, no, 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 it's not gonna be okay. We have to say something. We have to be like, hey, I think something's wrong. I'm pretty sure because I've gathered the evidence and I've thought about this and I've talked to my buddies and I spent time in the intel community. So I have something like, my question is like, do you think your background helped spark this, you know, fervor inside you? And then that's because like most of the population is sitting here fat and happy. I mean, like, where does that, how do you think about that?
Now, I'm going to answer it this way. It's a great question. So my foundational why on the passion and the unlimited energy I have to address this stems from, so my father was born in Leningrad, Russia, Soviet Union, during the 900-day blockade that the Nazis surrounded and blockaded Leningrad when he was basically 3 to 5 years old. Okay, 3 to 6ish, right? And what does that mean to people that don't know what that entails? That means that they completely blockaded the city to the point where individuals were rationed out food to the tune of 120. I remember him telling me this: 125 grams per day. Well, what does that mean? If it's like, I don't know, say 30 grams an ounce. So you're getting about 4.5 ounces of bread as an allocation of your dietary staple food for the entire day. About an ounce and a half of food. Okay.
Yep.
So a lot of people died off, millions, right? And so my father survived that. So then what am I doing in my life where I've even come close to experiencing anything remotely uncomfortable, even remotely close to that? Now, I used to wrestle in high school. I used to, cut weight in three
Same.
days.
Yeah, yeah.
I dropped 12, 13 pounds when I was already 4% body fat.
Yeah.
I get it, right? But that's like self induced. Well, I get it. Like recently in January, I broke my leg 3 ways for, snap, crackle, pop. It was, it was uncomfortable. It exhibited some discomfort, but it's not real discomfort because you already know, like, all right, you're going to come out of it. Whereas psychologically, when you're put in a position where you're literally at the precipice of death and you got to fight tooth and nail and claw your way out of it, that's a different struggle, right? And so I guess probably deep down inside, knowing that and his struggles and him fleeing the Soviet Union from persecution back in the 70s, being able to exit with nothing. So that's probably helps
Yeah.
me and motivate me moving forward. But also, when I observed what they did, when our civilian leadership at the highest level took and decided for themselves to go after, at the time, and for me still, the most respected intelligence and general officer of our generation, probably of our nation's history, probably going, he'll be the most consequential general. History's not over yet on him. Going,
Yeah.
maybe after General George Washington. When I observed firsthand, secondhand, directly, and like secondhand what they did to him, meaning the 39 that unmasked illegally and started spying on a respected general, when one of them was a vice president, when they started targeting both political parties, that didn't sit well with me, and so I had to use my methodology to start to dig deep. And so my background, family wise, and I apologize for the background. I'm at a pool here, just chillaxing, and so that coupled with what they did to General Flynn crossed two red lines for me. And so if you saw my testimony in Arizona in February 23rd of 2023, and it's my pinned tweet on my X account, uh, and the Senator Champ asked me, like, you're going around the country. I'm retired, right? Educating, informing people of what's going on. It's like I see it. I see what it is, and I'm. Some people have called me like I'm the current Paul Revere. I'm sounding the alarm, and
Yeah.
while I'm alive, this garbage and the flood of communism, whatever you want to call it, it's not coming on my watch. Now, it may come into other households, but not into my household, because guess what? I will take you, and like I said, it's going to be a game of chicken. I don't care how many trillions of dollars back you, and I don't care how much kinetic physical capability you come at me. You are not going to break me. I will break you first, and then we'll see what happens after that. Because I am willing to mutilate whoever comes after me to the max, even if it results in my death. But I will always operate in beyond reproach, and I will do it in the most calm, cool, collected. It may be stern. I may make sounds that offend you. Great. I'm here to provide your offense, but I will do it in the most professional way that I can think of, using the exact terminology that addresses and describes what I see going on based on my 25 years of professional experience that we just discussed.
Yeah. I had a question for you is that so the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, was formed specifically for the DoD to have their own intelligence apparatus. Is that
In
correct?
1962, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong as well, that they did that because they were getting bad intel from either men were dying because of whatever they got from the CIA, NSA, something like that. Is that correct?
So it's a great question. I used to teach this sort of stuff. So the way our current intelligence community is set up, in its current form, stems from a few key documents, right? So the U.S. Constitution lays out in order to provide for the common defense, right? That's what created some of the institutions. Now, some of the institutions in our national security ecosystem predate the U.S. Constitution. So the Minutemen, the Massachusetts National Guard, is the very first National Guard because there's 54 of them now, each state and territory. Well, not all states and federal territories, only four of the six territories. But the U.S. Constitution, in order to provide the common defense, and then some of the big documents are really the National Security Act of 1947, which created the War Department, created the CIA from the Office of Strategic Services, and the State Department. Okay, and it wasn't until later that you started to create other entities. So the Defense Intelligence Agency in 1962, and that was essentially the focal point of the Department of Defense's analytic capability that managed and was the focal point, liaison, coordination, which later became the coordinating body and the point lead for all the combatant commands at the operational level, and then at the national strategic level, even in some regards operating above the NSA, the National Reconnaissance Office, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the service component intelligence services, whether it's Army, INSCOM, Air Force, uh, Marine, Department of Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force, and then when in Title 10 capacity, the Coast Guard, when it's not in peacetime, technically, if you will, under Department of Homeland Security authorities. So, a longer answer to your question, yes, it was created
Yeah.
as a result of everyone trying to create their fiefdom in order to provide intelligence that they didn't need, that they could, build a budget from, create a capability to feed the military industrial complex. This was at the beginning stages of the Vietnam War, and they didn't want to rely on the Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department,
Yeah.
which has its own touch point to the intel community. That they represent one of the 17 agencies, which is the Intelligence Research Bureau, INR,
Yeah. Well,
by
I
the
guess the
state.
reason why I asked that is that there's and that's I feel like that's the delineating factor. I thought from General Flynn, which he was the head of, correct?
Yeah, so DIA is technically, I would argue, it might be the largest intelligence organization on the planet,
Yeah. And
depending
so
how you
he,
crunch the numbers for human
so that's
capital
a part of like,
and likely
okay, yeah,
influence and control of intelligence. So there's two intelligence budgetary allocation programs from the Congress. You have the military intelligence program known as the MIP. That's for operational kind of defense and strategic related and tactical as well. Uh, Intel budget, and then you have what's known as the National Intelligence Program, and that includes strategic intel community that are kind of managed by the Office of Director of National Intelligence, because there's overlap, right? You got the ODNI, and you got the SecDef, and then the subordinate components there, and then you have a black budget, right?
um, so I think, and that's the part, the delineating factor that separated him out from the rest of the community, that his background was, say, clean, and he questioned the status quo of what was going on. So he, basically removed from the standard Intel community, I guess. Again, I'm kind of speculating, asking kind of to get your thoughts, and that's why he was targeted, and whoever was associated with that. Is that correct, or
So I'm gonna
something like that?
answer your question by framing it differently, and then first asking, have you watched the movie Flynn Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost?
I have not yet, so I obviously will after this episode.
Okay, if you have not watched that and you want a full, wholesome answer to your question, you will get the most fulsome answer to that question by watching that movie. Now, let me summarize it. You are asking why and who within the deep state, by name and organization, was involved in targeting and taking out General Flynn, and why, I think is what you're asking.
Yes.
That'd be fair? Okay. Again, like
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
used to teach intelligence analysis. First thing you do is understand the intel question by reframing it, going through a 6-step process that I already did internally in my brain as I listened to you speak. So now that we're in agreement on the question, I'll answer it this way.
Thank you.
General Flynn spent a third of a century in the system. He knew a lot of, like, what I know is about 1/100th of what he knows. Okay. And if he doesn't know something, he knows exactly who to ask. right? Because he knows way more people in the system than I do. So if you're squeaky clean in that entire rubric and you want to audit, as a DIA director, you want to audit DIA and all the money related to DIA's allocation of resources, and you're asked to depart, and then all of a sudden you're the National Security Advisor, which is the position above the ODNI, above the Secretary of Defense, above the foreign policy institutions, so State Department, and all the like everything law enforcement, everything national security, everything foreign, domestic, in the intel, foreign policy, and security field, it rests on the shoulders of the National Security Advisor. So when the National Security Advisor, as he's coming in before January 20th, one of the meetings he has, and this is alluded to in the movie, he basically has a meeting and asks, hey, I want to audit the entire everything with a specific separate meeting on I want to take a look at the funding and authorizations for all presidential findings. You know what a presidential finding is?
No.
It's the legal term for when the United States government, via its president, signed, written, conducts a covert action. Okay? So imagine a national security advisor wants to see every single document signed by every previous president that authorized and the budget and the resources allocated to conduct that covert action. Could that include what occurred to John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, JFK, I said, and Martin Luther King Jr., and every other finding? Is that problematic if you are part of the institution that was involved in that? Because you're being audited by someone that's clean, and I'm referring to CIA. What does that do to the Bush family that used to have HW as the director? It's problematic, isn't it? What does it do to the John Brennan and Barry Husseins of the world that authorized John Brennan to vigilante style, without due process, conduct a drone execution of an American citizen abroad? It's problematic. What about those that are making money hand over fist off of the military industrial complex as you start to follow the money across both political parties? That's problematic. So I would suspect that that was very instrumental in making sure that, from a strictly national security perspective, you have to remove General Flynn. From a political perspective, he was twice appointed by Obama and now a national security advisor for an incoming Republican president. Do you think the Republican establishment, in the names of Paul Ryan, Reince Priebus, and Mitch McConnell, and Mike Pence, who was the Republican Governors Association chairman before he became the vice presidential pick, want from their perspective, twice appointed Barry Hussein appointee for that was his director of DIA and assistant director of national intelligence over at the ODNI? Probably not. But on top of that, when you add, how is it possible that within 2 weeks of Pence being nominated as the VP pick for Trump, that you have Crossfire Hurricane being launched when Mike Pence served 10 of 12 years on the Judiciary Committee? And then his chief of staff, when he becomes the vice president, is married to Peter Strzok's senior Russia analyst, Catherine Seaman. You don't think Mike Pence knew? Or wait, did I tell you that one of senior lawyers, the senior lawyer for Mike Pence, when I had a conversation with him, he didn't know who I was, said, never seen Mike Pence as adamant as he was when he was trying to convince Trump to fire General Flynn. Is it because General Flynn would have scratched the surface, hired an Ivan Raiklin to be in the position as Alexander Vindman later became, in order to expose the Biden criminal syndicate back in 2017, and then further research to expose Catherine Seaman and her relationship with Josh Pitcock, who was the chief of staff for Mike Pence, and his
Oh,
involvement in authorizing the illegal spying operation in 2016 to provide the necessary top cover to Republican Jim Comey and Republican Rod Rosenstein, and so on and so forth. Dude, I got everybody's name and receipts.
so how do
600
you,
names.
I see, I'm tracking. I don't even have to, I go off of a vibe check, so frequency, resonance, vibration, and like how I feel because it saved my life so many times, right? And or just regular daily decisions of just how I do things and feel.
Yeah, I felt it all, and I was like, you know what? I want to have maximum proof. I want to be beyond
Yeah,
reproach
yeah.
when I
And I
present
think
my
that
evidence.
yes. So again, that goes right into what I was kind of thinking to ask you next is like, how do you break the narrative? How do you pull everybody's mind out of either call it the woke mind virus, call it the pleasure trap, call it the like I don't know what where they're whatever the narrative or the thing is like how do you pull everybody out of that with I know I think you're gonna tell me just how you're gonna do it, but it's like how do you break the narrative like and convince people like let's say the baby boomers, right? Where they're just like they're happy is everything, well Biden's, he's okay or whoever how do you break that narrative? Maybe you've already asked that of saying or I've already asked that
Gotcha.
thing where you're, above reproach, but do you think
No,
that's it, or
I got the
is there
question.
something more?
I think I'm going to reframe it again and say, how do we get those non critical, toxic, feckless, coward lemmings in our society to get off of the information platforms that are manipulated and curated by the very individuals that I've listed that are on my 600-person deep state target list? Meaning, how do we get them off of Facebook? How do we get them off of Insta garbage? Off of reading the Washington Compost? Off of reading New Woke Slimes or Raw Sewage or Huffington Compost, right? Or Smother Jokes or Roytards, the British one, right? Well, you
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
free speech platforms and you do exactly what you and I are doing right now, Blake. I am
Right.
open
I will.
to conduct unlimited amount of interviews on anybody's long form show, live stream X, podcast, Rumble channel. So the question is, well, where do we go if
Yeah.
we got to
Well.
get off of Facebook, Insta garbage? But they're gonna basically
Yeah.
always say, well, but I want to provide gas so that my Nazi handlers can go ahead and gas chamber me
Yeah.
in the Matrix
Yeah.
over at Facebook because all my other friends and relatives are there. Well, guess what? Please expedite your demise. Or the other
Well
option is,
said.
how about you go on Rumble, on X,
Yeah.
on Telegram? If you still have TDS, don't go on Truth. Go on Telegram, go on Getter.
Yeah.
If you have TDS affiliated syndrome, then I get it. You're not going to want to go on Getter. Um, Gab, Clout
Well,
Hub, Locals, Substack, right?
I think that is well said. So that's I think I had that coming. So that's so I think we that's why I'm doing this. So well fucking said. So okay. So going into my next question is in
So
similar
the short
vein.
answer to your question,
Yeah.
do exactly what we're doing right now and then share it on the platforms that will allow it to speak. And I thought about this
Okay.
yesterday. I should have thought about this earlier. I want to start doing more podcasts on those platforms that censor so that those people that are still remaining on that platform, I want to be the person that suspends their account so that they're like, oh, wait,
Oh,
Ivan wasn't
yeah.
joking. So I'm going to be doing more podcasts
Yeah.
on the commie tubes, on the
Yeah.
Insta garbages, and on the fake books with the sole purpose of talking about things that guarantee you're suspended so that you know that there's a censorship regime.
I think that's the
Because if I
important part.
suspend
Like,
them, that forces them to go over to the
yeah,
free speech platforms. Brilliant.
right, right. Well said. That's well said. Thank you.
And
All right.
let
So
me
next,
finish with this real quick. But
yeah.
I'm sorry. This is
No, go
important.
ahead.
As of last week, X is now in the number 3 spot above Facebook and Insta garbage in terms of
Yeah,
minutes of consumption. So that's massive.
yeah.
Now we just have to move
Makes sense.
X and Rumble above CommiTube and CommiSearch.
Yes. Yeah.
One
Um,
search engine you can use is Togoda, but that's being
to
developed
go to.
further.
Okay. Okay.
Togoda.
Is DuckDuckGo compromised? I
I
feel like
think
I've
they're
I've heard
using
that, but
similar. I think they're using Bing, Microsoft, but again, like
okay. Yep.
so this weekend, I kind of upgraded in my technical freedom platforms. So I just ordered Starlink mobile because
Okay.
that's out. That provides a mobile or at home 300 megabits up and down. So that's kind of my alternate internet
Okay.
comms platform for when they shut it down. Because the FBI and the CISA just gave a
Yeah.
public service announcement saying that, hey, expect us to do a DDoS attack on election information, meaning X, internet. That's my translation of it, right?
Yes.
Etc.
Yes.
And number two, uh, Eric Prince came out with his unplugged phone.
Yep. Saw that.
Ordered one of those. Patriot Mobile is another tool. I get it; they're using some of the incumbent plays, but I think they're well positioned to pivot should that be shut down. And so I'm trying to get out of the matrix so that we get onto the Patriot platforms that have exhibited and showcased that they're willing to take on pain to make sure that free speech remains. And Elon Musk's doing the same thing over at X.
Um. So yeah, plug out. So I use a cryptostorm.io, and it's a VPN that I have found to be beyond reproach in their ability. They've shut down and or closed off their whole business when they were asked to be audited. So it's a really good. I don't know if you're interested, but they do offer all you can do via pay via crypto, complete anonymity. Where I found where I when I've needed it, but I digress. So you kind of just chatted about kind of election, and so I'd like to tap on that from my perspective and what I think about it, and then to get yours. So my thought is a while back when there was first election, like, they were like, when Trump first said, it's like, I don't know if I'll accept it, and everybody was like, how dare he, or whatever that was. And then I
The very
started,
first
had my
tweet
own.
that was censored was when he said ballot drop boxes are kind of susceptible, are
Yeah,
possibly there's a remote
sure.
chance possibility that it opens things up for shenanigans,
Right,
fraud.
right. Exactly. It's just like
So what did
leaky,
Brian
right?
Otten? Yeah, so what did Laura Demlow, Brian Otten, and Chris Krebs do? You know these names?
It's familiar, but not a lot, not very well.
So Laura Demlow was the section chief for the Foreign Influence Task Force at FBI headquarters that was created by Christopher Wray, the director, to perpetuate and institutionalize the Russia hoax and fund a section to promulgate that, yep, there's Russia. She was the section
Yeah,
chief. The supervisory intel analyst was and is, I feel to this day, Brian Otten. His position before he took that role was the senior intel analyst on Crossfire Hurricane, the illegal spying op on Trump in the campaign. So, what was the role of that organization? It was to provide cover for the Biden criminal syndicate laptop and to make sure that they would steal the 2020 election in the court of public opinion through big tech. How did they do it? They, according to Mark Zuckerbuck when he was interviewed by Joe Rogan, they sent over a couple of FBI agents to tell us that the New York Post story on the 51 spies who lied that said that the Biden laptop had all the earmarks of a Russian information campaign. Well, later in October, these FBI agents said, "Oh, this is Russian disinformation. And who said it? I want to know. But I would probably, with moderate level confidence, say that it is likely Brian Auten, Laura Demlow, and Elvis Chan out in the San Francisco field office of the FBI. See, I got them by name and date, and I have lots of evidence to support those assessments. Okay,
What's your thought of it? Is conformity the new cowardice? Like, what's going on? Like, I just don't get it.
no, it's raw political power at all costs to retain and remain in power, and then it's exacerbated by if we lose power, they're going to come after us because we have conducted ourselves in such an illegal, belligerent, criminal manner while we were in power. And if they expose that and are in a position of power to create consequences, like Hillary said, we will be hanging from a noose.
Yeah.
Quoting Hillary.
So my question, the election is maybe a it's not maybe
So
not
the
a step
election is
above,
just
but
one of the components of making sure that
yeah,
they were able to retain power.
sure. And
So
so my thought,
like
so my question. Sorry, go ahead.
some of the people involved in this, so the general counsel, the senior lawyer at the FBI that authorized the illegal spying on the Trump campaign, later becomes the number two lawyer at Twitter that coordinated everything over at Big Tech on behalf of headquarters. Those two that I just mentioned, Laura Demlow and Brian Auten, Elvis Chan in the San Francisco field office. The former ops guy in Crossfire Hurricane, Joe Pientka III, later becomes the number three guy counter intel at the San Francisco field office. So he may not have been directly involved, but he knew what was going on. So if you were to ask me who's the number one potential mother of all whistleblowers in this entire scheme that can take the whole regime down, it's Joe Pientka. And that's why I call August of 2024 Joe Pientka Awareness Month. And so if you want to know more about how to make sure that these criminal actors are exposed maximally, I suggest that you reach out to Elon Musk to release the mother of all Twitter files, which is all the communications of Jim Baker, who was a Twitter employee, and all of his communications and the Twitter direct messages, Slack channel communications, and emails of everybody on my
And that
Twitter
was all
deep state target
backdoor,
list.
correct? Kind of going backdoor through the whole time.
Yeah, the censorship industrial complex, all these conspirators.
Yeah.
So the reason why I know that this is legit is because the amount of left wing media hit pieces that have been done on me as it relates to this has been far greater than I have received since when I tweeted out the Operation Pence card memo that Trump retweeted. So when there's a what they call a conspiracy theory or a specious legal argument or a dubious legal theory, they are trying to debunk something that, should it get out at scale, they are screwed. And so when I see those indicators as an analyst, that's when I put out to everyone, if you are thinking about creating a podcast, you want me to be your first episode. If you have a podcast, you want me on your episode. I want to reach you and all of your audiences. I will run these interviews day and night, 12 hours a day from now until September 3rd and probably beyond. But for now, I'm trying to schedule from now until September 3rd, when I expect Elon Musk to release the mother of all Twitter files, which is the largest criminal trove of evidence of the entire deep state target list that I have, proving every single thing that I have assessed to this point. And you're going to see some of the sources and evidence that I may or may not have seen in the most transparent, legal, moral, and ethical fashion possible. And guess what? Elon Musk just transitioned his holdings of Twitter, meaning headquarters, from California to Texas. And now Ken Paxton, the Attorney General in Texas, who just slayed the Bush syndicate when they attempted to impeach him and is now ready to go scorched earth exposure, the Attorney General in Texas has full jurisdiction over a Texas corporation known as X to subpoena any and all records that Elon Musk is not maybe comfortable disclosing in his mother of all Twitter files dump. And as that comes out, it would be great for every single content creator to include Tucker Carlson, and semi woke coward Joe Rogan to finally come out of the woodwork and wake up and say, "Yep, I was a partial coward. Now that I've seen the evidence of Elon Musk, I am no longer going to be the semi toxic, feckless coward, slightly more courageous, especially on one subject, right? The whole horse dewormer stuff, than others. And he's going to help out in explaining to the masses outside of Facebook, Insta garbage, new woke slimes. You get my point. All of the legacy fake info producers and expose all of them. Because guess what? Twitter 1.0 was part of that scheme because Reuters was the official fact checker of Twitter 1.0. And if you do the link analysis, as I always say on every podcast, Reuters, Thomson Reuters CEO James Smith is a board member of the number one DNA mutilation distributor throughout the world, known as Pfizer. Again, board member of Pfizer fail that created myocarditis and created heart explosions and DNA mutilation throughout millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of doses. They used their relationship to follow the money to sell their product by telling Twitter that you can only, when you mention the jabs, you have to call them as the most safe and effective, pristine elixir ever known in human history. That's the only way you're going to call them. So you promote them maximally. And then they colluded with those that they had massive advertising dollars with, Faux News, Criminal News Network, MSLSD, to make sure that they also promoted on legacy media outlets that this is the most beautiful concoction that would extend your life into the millennia if you consumed
Yeah.
the Pfizer product, known as the DNA mutilation injection. Oh, but wait, I tried to be the Paul Revere and explain all of this, and they told Twitter to censor and suspend me. And they told LinkedIn to suspend me. And they told Instagarbage and Fakebooked to suspend me, President Trump, every single other person, so that your family members, your friends, your neighbors, everybody that has an internet connection was like, "Oh, I have to get put a mask on, a face toilet. It's not for me. It's for my friends and family because they have an immunocompromised state. So I'm going to go ahead and asphyxiate myself, my children, and mutilate them in the process once the DNA mutilations products come out." Correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong.
No, we're tracking the exact same, and I've
I got to take a
I've
breath
taken heat. I've been, oh no, I get I'll talk for a little bit, but
since I
I've
don't have a
taken
face
heat in
toilet
the
on.
same in the same way of just like because I'm contrarian by nature. And when my job working for the big boss man, when I was a Navy contractor, and my boss came, sent me an email. I was like, Blake, I'm gonna need your COVID vaccination. I'm gonna need to see it.
Yeah,
And I
because
was
they were
like,
duped by the very Laura Demlos and Brian
yeah,
Autens and Joe Pienkas and Elvis Chans of the world to think what I just explained.
yeah. And I sent having a family of lawyers, so I always question things and have a thought, and also just my own. But then I got a retort from a law firm in California, like probably one of the only Republican law firms there, and submitted it. It's basically 3 pages of about 20 questions of like, hey, sure, happy to get it, but if you can answer, these 20 questions of like, who in your company, which doctor authorized it. If I do get, basically, hey, if I get sick and hear all these questions about the emergency use, yada yada yada, and then I sent that over, and then my boss, nothing. He didn't say anything back. And then through back channels, like, hey, Blake, they can't accept that exposure. So you're good. And so I was like, oh, it was just that simple to just be like, wait, no.
Yeah. No,
stand my
nice.
fucking ground.
So
And
exactly. So what
you
I
know,
did was, hey, they were, I was still in the reserves and then as a DoD contractor, and they both asked
yeah,
me, we need to know your what they called vaccine status. And I was like, well, if you can get your general counsel as a contractor or the JAG on the military side, if you can have them in writing tell me under what authority they have the ability to compel me to follow what, and for them to explain that it is a lawful order, I will consider my next steps once you provide that to me. They couldn't. Well, I didn't have to
and I
consider my
think
next steps because I already planned on retiring.
yeah,
And I told them, if you
um,
get in the way of my retirement, then you're going to be facing legal risk. And I have no issues up to this point with anybody in my chain of command. We had a great relationship. And I said, like, as a professional, I'm advising you to make sure that I retire according to my timeline. If not, you'll be a defendant in one of the lawsuits upon which I'm directly or indirectly involved in, which is all of them related to this subject in the country.
yeah. So I had another question on election. So my question or my thought is, if
Wait
our
a second. What
election,
time
any
is it?
election,
Are we
where are
good
we
on
at?
time?
It's
We got 7 minutes.
all right, got it. If the elections aren't open source, third party verified, decentralized, something like that, that I could go on and see
Great
my
question.
vote along with every single one, because I've dabbled in crypto for a while. I think I watched the BlackRock CEO like last year said, like, I think Bitcoin is good. When he finally came around, or crypto. And I'm like, man, I had that opinion back in 2013 on an aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, and I was like, I figured that out. And so my point is that if an election system, whatever, isn't open source, third party verified, and me, Blake Fisher, Joe Schmo, go on to see where my election tally is, then it is compromised. What do you think?
I'm going to answer it this way because I think the question is probably, how do we guarantee going into this next election in 90 days, less than 90 days, we have a free, fair, fully transparent election in the most pristine fashion possible, knowing the limit on time? There is one method to do that, and it's so simple, and it follows the letter of our U.S. Constitution. Look up Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. The way that the state legislatures created the Constitution, they left the authority on allocating their state's electoral votes for president and vice president with the legislative body, House and Senate, right? So imagine a time on November 5th when the state House and the state Senate in all 50 states has a live streamed, in person, roll call vote on how those members of that legislature allocate their state's electoral votes. That means no illegals are voting. That means you're not using a machine. That means you have no software involved in that machine. That means you have no dirty voter rolls. That means you have no drop boxes. You have no mail in ballots. You have no overseas ballots. You have no foreign influence. You have a completely pristine system that the entire world can view live and recorded, where you see what state rep and how they vote, next state rep and how they vote. You know how many registered voters there are in each state house and state senate across the nation. You know how many are registered Republican and how many are registered Democrat. And you get to see how they vote. And guess what, America? 274 electoral votes are controlled by majority Republican legislatures. So, if every but one votes by political party under this framework, guess what happens? a free and fair, transparent election. And if you're concerned that, oh, what about the toxic, feckless, stone cold coward, gutless simp that's complicit and is on the take from Big Pharma and doesn't want to vote for the Republican nominee, I remind them this. And I remind them to remind their state rep and state senator that may vote against the Republican nominee. We will do to you in a much more aggressive manner and tone than what we did to Lizzie Cheney or Adam Kinzinger. You will face a political response and a legal, moral, and ethical response in a way that you and your family are not willing to withstand. Imagine those Republicans that voted in that Republican member of the House or Senate that are their constituents. What will they do to that person when they come back to the community after a vote for the Democrat nominee? What are the business owners going to do to him?
Accountability.
What are the business owners going to do? What are their neighbors going to do? What is the local bank where they bank at going to do? What is everybody in their ecosystem going to do? The sky's the limit.
Right.
Use your imagination. And I think that they're willing to go to the maximum.
Yeah.
But I
Because they're
always
not being
advocate for
represented.
legal,
Exactly.
moral, and ethical maximum.
Yeah. One last question. I know we're about to be done on time, and kind of to caveat of what we're just saying is that, and I've heard some of your rhetoric in the sense that you're not, I'm not, again, I think like it's simple to say I'm a right wing, I'm a Republican, I'm Democrat, where I see so often that a Republican, a Democrat are just the opposite sides of the same coin. And
The,
you reference
the only
Republicans and
thing worse
Democrats.
than the Republican is a Democrat.
And so, what's
There's nothing
your thought
worse.
to what's what's your thought on, so if somebody's listening to this, and so like I have family that are left wing, everybody's kind of both sides, is that to say that this isn't about Republican, Democrat, right wing, left wing. It's about, I think it's about the seeking of the truth. I
Right.
want the truth because I operate
Let
with
me,
radical transparency and truthfulness. And so,
I
what's
got
your
one,
thought?
like a
Last
minute
thought
or
here.
so. Let me answer it this way.
Yeah.
Great question. So, specifically to those folks that you're referring to, I want to, like, if you look at my list, you know who's on there? Jared Kushner is on my list. Mike Pence is on my list because those were the two individuals that were managing Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx with the whole COVID con.
Right.
Jared Kushner was the shadow governor. Mike Pence was the publicly facing leader of that White House coronavirus task force as they doled out contracts on who would be executed through the ventilators, as they asphyxiated on who would get the contracts for the face toilets, and then who would be medically nose raped through the PCR tests, as they made money hand over fist. Pence's affiliates and Jared Kushner's affiliates. I don't care about political party. Number two, when Elon Musk discloses the trove of evidence that he's sitting on, you're going to see many Republicans and many Democrats that we're going to collectively see as being part of the destruction of our constitutional order and the curated, manipulated, deliberate falsification of information to make sure that they could create a new product line known as self mutilation. You guys refer to it as trans. That is called self mutilation. It's creating a new medical product line that is maiming, disfiguring, castrating, mutilating you and your children, unbeknownst to
I,
you. And
I
you
you
thought it was a
yeah.
natural effect.
No. I did a post on that just the other day on X. So it's me and I have a
Follow the
14-year-old
money.
son, and yeah, yeah. Well, sir, thank you very much for your time. It's
So
been
step one,
enlightening. I
mother of all Twitter files,
yeah,
September 3rd. That will
yep.
be the impetus for the political courage to make us move to elections that are by the state legislatures, and then we can start to conduct precedent that was already set by Alvin Bragg, Fannie Willis on the law enforcement side, and then Michael Byrd and Lila Morris. Because Michael Byrd conducted objectively reasonable conduct, didn't he, when he executed Ashley Babbitt? And Lila Morris conducted what? Objectively reasonable conduct when she executed Roseanne Boylan. So, when the evidence is released and the DAs conduct the same thing that Fannie and Alvin did, then the sheriffs can do the same thing that the law enforcement, U.S. Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police Department did to peaceful First Amendment, unarmed election justice rally attendees. They set the precedent. We will continue it times 600.
All right. Well, this is finishing up. If you would just say shout out to where everybody could find you on your social media, your website, or any of those details.
Raiklin.com is my website. Send me an email at info@raiklin.com if you want to have me on your show. And I'm on X, Ivan Raiklin. Just put in my last name on the social media platforms that are free speech promoting, and I'm the verified account on those platforms. All right, brother. Thanks
All
for
right, sir.
having me,
Thank you for
Blake.
your time. Have a great day. This is
All
end
right.
call sign. All right, sir.
See
See
ya.
ya.